The air, thick with the scent of decaying pine and damp earth, hung heavy over the ancient forest. October 1944. A curtain of twilight perpetually veiled the entangled boughs, a sombre prelude to the drama about to unfold. Along the contested border, where the land bled from one nation into another, men prepared to meet their fates. This was no ordinary woodland. This was a labyrinth of towering trees and treacherous ravines, a place where shadows danced with death, and the wind carried the mournful sighs of those already lost. It would become known, with chilling accuracy, as the meat grinder. The whispers had begun weeks earlier, insidious rumours of setbacks and stalled offensives, a stark contrast to the buoyant hopes of early autumn. Victory, once seemingly within grasp, now receded into the gloom, obscured by a growing unease. The initial confidence, born of summer triumphs and the perceived fragility of the opposition, had curdled into grim determination. The advance had stalled. The promised breakthrough remained elusive. The seemingly broken foe, reeling from past defeats, had found reserves of strength, a desperate tenacity fueled by the defence of hearth and home. The men were beginning to understand with a growing sense of dread that this war was far from over, that the path to its conclusion would be paved with suffering. Before them lay the Ruhr, its vital water reservoirs a strategic prize of immense importance. Intelligence suggested the enemy held the dams, poised to unleash a torrent of destruction upon the valley below. A calculated act that would transform the terrain into an impassable mire, delaying the Allied advance for weeks, perhaps months. Winter was closing in, a relentless adversary in its own right. Time was of the essence. To reach the dams they had to traverse the dense, unforgiving heart of the forest, a 54-square-mile expanse of tangled growth, a natural fortress seemingly designed to swallow armies whole. The orders were clear: advance, secure the forest, and seize the dams. But the cost, already steep, was about to become unimaginable. The decision to enter the forest was met with a mixture of resignation and apprehension. It seemed madness, a reckless gamble dictated by necessity, a plunge into the very jaws of the enemy's trap. The forest negated many of the advantages they had come to rely on: their superior numbers, the mobility of their vehicles, the overwhelming force of their air power, all rendered largely ineffective by the claustrophobic terrain. The enemy, entrenched and concealed, waited patiently in the shadows, masters of this domain of darkness and deception. They knew the ground, every twist and turn, every hidden gully, every advantageous firing position. They had transformed the forest into a killing field, a maze of interlocking defences designed to bleed the attackers dry. Their adversary, a seasoned commander hardened by years of conflict, understood the strategic significance of this woodland. He saw it as a sanctuary, a place where his outnumbered forces could negate the enemy's strengths and exploit their vulnerabilities. He knew the forest. He understood its secrets, its hidden pathways, its natural defences. He had prepared meticulously, transforming the terrain into a deadly obstacle course, a gauntlet of concealed emplacements and carefully laid traps. He had sown the ground with mines, strung wire across trails, and camouflaged gun positions with painstaking care. For him, this forest was not just a battlefield. It was a weapon, a strategic asset that could turn the tide of the conflict. To him, this was a defensive masterpiece, a meticulously crafted killing ground that would become known as a near miracle. The defenders were well prepared. They had burrowed deep into the earth, constructing intricate networks of bunkers and trenches, lines of interlocking fire waiting for those who dared to advance into the forest. They had registered every likely approach, pre-sighted their mortars and artillery, and zeroed in their machine guns on every trail and clearing. The forest, once a place of beauty, had been transformed into a charnel house, a place of perpetual dread where death lurked around every corner. As casualties mounted, the replacements arrived, green and untested, thrust into the maelstrom with a little preparation, lambs led to the slaughter. The veterans looked at them with pity and a grim fatalism, knowing that many would not survive their first encounter with the forest's horrors. The whispers intensified, now laced with fear and the bitter tang of impending doom. The forest straddled the boundary between two distinct operational areas, further complicating an already convoluted situation. Lines of command blurred, communication faltered, and coordination became a near impossibility. 14 divisions, each with its own objectives and challenges, were drawn into the vortex, feeding into the insatiable appetite of the meat grinder. Initially, the defence of the forest rested upon the shoulders of 2 understrength divisions, a mere 5,000 men, with 1,000 more held in reserve. However, as the fighting intensified, reinforcements trickled in, bolstering the defenders' ranks and prolonging the agony. The battle had begun, a slow, grinding descent into the heart of darkness. The initial probes into the forest's periphery met with fierce resistance, a brutal awakening to the realities of the battle to come. The enemy was dug in deep, concealed within bunkers and camouflaged fighting positions, raining down a withering fire upon the advancing troops. Assaults faltered, ground gained was measured in yards, and the casualty list grew with alarming speed. Villages on the forest's edge became contested zones, scenes of savage house-to-house fighting, where every window and doorway concealed a potential threat. Each advance was countered with relentless ferocity, and the forest floor became saturated with blood. One regiment tasked with capturing a strategic crossroads found itself pinned down by a relentless barrage of artillery fire, the shells exploding in the trees above, showering the men with deadly splinters of wood and metal. Another battalion, attempting to outflank a fortified position, stumbled into a minefield, the ground erupting in a series of deafening explosions, tearing limbs from bodies and leaving a trail of carnage in its wake. Each attack became a costly and agonizing ordeal, a testament to the enemy's skill and the forest's unforgiving nature. The whispers turned into cries, echoing the screams of the wounded and the dying. The offensive, launched with optimistic fervour in early October, quickly bogged down in a quagmire of mud, blood, and shattered dreams. The initial objective, the town of Schmidt, remained tantalizingly out of reach, a symbol of the unattainable amidst the surrounding chaos. The men, exhausted and demoralized, dug in where they could, seeking meagre shelter from the relentless rain and the constant threat of enemy fire. Sleep became a luxury, a fleeting escape from the harsh realities of the forest. Food was scarce, ammunition dwindled, and the whispers of despair grew louder with each passing day. One unit, attempting to secure a vital supply route, suffered staggering losses in a single day, their ranks decimated by a combination of artillery strikes and well-coordinated ambushes. 2/3 of the men were lost, their bodies strewn across the forest floor, a testament to the brutal efficiency of the enemy's defences. The survivors, traumatized and battle-weary, retreated in disarray, leaving behind their dead and wounded. The forest had claimed another victory, its thirst for blood seemingly insatiable. By mid-October, after weeks of relentless fighting, the advance had stalled. Thousands of men had fallen, their lives sacrificed in the pursuit of a seemingly impossible objective. The ground gained, a mere 3,000 yards, was a pittance compared to the cost. The division, battered and depleted, was relieved, its shattered remnants withdrawn from the line, replaced by fresh troops, equally unaware of the horrors that awaited them in the depths of the forest. The whispers now spoke of futility, of a senseless slaughter in a place where victory seemed unattainable. The arrival of a new division brought a renewed sense of hope, a brief respite from the relentless gloom. The attack resumed, a fresh wave of men thrown against the formidable defences, but the outcome remained the same: slow, agonizing progress, measured in yards and paid for in blood. One regiment, tasked with clearing a particularly dense section of woodland, found itself trapped in a minefield. The men pinned down by enemy fire, unable to move without triggering further explosions. For 2 days they remained stranded, enduring constant shelling and sniper fire, their ranks slowly thinning as the forest claimed its due. The whispers now carried the stench of death, a constant reminder of the grim reality of their situation. Another regiment, tasked with securing a vital road, managed to capture a nearby ridge, only to be driven back by a fierce counterattack. The enemy, reinforced and determined to hold their ground, launched a series of relentless assaults, pushing the attackers back into the forest, leaving behind a trail of casualties. The battle raged back and forth, a brutal tug of war for control of the high ground, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The whispers now echoed the sounds of battle, the crack of gunfire, the whine of artillery shells, the screams of the wounded. One battalion, pushing deeper into the forest, managed to capture the town of Schmidt, cutting off the enemy's supply route. It was a hard-fought victory, achieved at a heavy cost, but it offered a glimmer of hope amidst the surrounding darkness. However, their triumph was short-lived. The enemy, determined to regain control of the town, launched a massive counterattack, spearheaded by tanks. The defenders, isolated and outnumbered, fought valiantly, but they were no match for the armoured onslaught. The town fell, and the battalion, overwhelmed and surrounded, was decimated. Many were taken prisoner, their ordeal far from over. The whispers now spoke of defeat, of the futility of their efforts, of the inevitability of death. The desperate attempt to stem the tide involved the deployment of tanks, a calculated gamble to break the enemy's grip on the captured town. A company of armoured vehicles, lumbering along the narrow trails, attempted to reinforce the beleaguered defenders. But the forest proved to be an unforgiving environment for tanks, the dense trees and uneven terrain restricting their manoeuvrability and making them vulnerable to ambush. The enemy, concealed in the shadows, waited patiently for their opportunity. One by one, the tanks fell victim to the enemy's well-laid traps. Anti-tank mines, buried beneath the muddy ground, detonated with devastating force, crippling the vehicles and sending plumes of smoke and flame billowing into the air. Panzerfausts fired from close range pierced the tank's armour, turning their interiors into infernos. Within hours, the armoured advance had been shattered, 5 tanks reduced to smouldering wrecks, their crews either dead or wounded. The whispers now carried the acrid smell of burning metal and the haunting cries of trapped men. The enemy, emboldened by their success, launched another counterattack seeking to exploit the confusion and chaos. But this time, the tide began to turn. The remaining tanks, positioned in defensive positions, unleashed a withering barrage of fire upon the advancing enemy infantry, halting their advance in its tracks. The tank crews, veterans of countless battles, fought with grim determination, their guns spitting fire and death, repelling wave after wave of attackers. The whispers now mingled the sounds of defiance with the groans of the dying. The battle raged throughout the day, a brutal and chaotic melee fought amidst the trees and shadows. The forest floor became a battlefield, strewn with the debris of war, shattered trees, wrecked vehicles, and the bodies of the dead. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and the screams of the wounded. The men fought with a ferocity born of desperation, knowing that their survival depended on their ability to hold their ground. The whispers now carried the echoes of their courage, a testament to their indomitable spirit. A nearby town, also under attack, was partially recaptured by the enemy, further complicating the already dire situation. The fighting became even more intense, the battle line shifting back and forth, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The men, exhausted and demoralized, fought on, driven by a sense of duty and a determination to survive. The whispers now carried the weight of their burden, a sombre reminder of the sacrifices they were making. After weeks of relentless fighting, the first phase of the battle came to an end, a bitter and costly defeat. The town remained in enemy hands, the supply route remained severed, and the forest remained a formidable obstacle. The men, weary and battered, were withdrawn from the line, their spirits broken, their ranks depleted. The whispers now spoke of failure, of the futility of their efforts, of the horrors they had witnessed. This second phase of the battle, codenamed Operation Queen, was launched with renewed determination, a fresh attempt to break through the enemy's defences and reach the vital water reservoirs. A new division, fresh from training, was tasked with clearing the northern half of the forest, capturing a strategic town, and advancing towards the dams. But the enemy, well entrenched and determined to hold their ground, was waiting for them. The whispers now carried the foreboding of even greater trials to come. The offensive began with a massive artillery barrage, the shells raining down upon the forest, tearing apart trees and churning up the earth. The men, huddled in their foxholes, braced themselves for the onslaught, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. The barrage lifted, and the advance began, the men moving forward through the smoke and debris, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the enemy. The whispers now amplified the sounds of destruction, a symphony of chaos and despair. The advance into the northern reaches of the forest met with fierce resistance, a brutal reminder of the enemy's tenacity. 2 regiments, advancing on parallel paths, encountered a maze of interlocking defences, each one designed to inflict maximum casualties. The enemy, concealed in bunkers and camouflaged fighting positions, poured down a withering fire upon the attackers, halting their advance in its tracks. The whispers now screamed of pain, of the agony of the wounded, of the terror of the dying. One regiment, attempting to cross a seemingly insignificant stream, found itself trapped in a deadly crossfire, the enemy's machine guns tearing through their ranks. The men, pinned down and exposed, were mowed down in droves, their bodies piling up on the banks of the stream. The whispers now sobbed with the grief of loss, of the shattered lives, of the unfulfilled dreams. Another regiment, pushing deeper into the forest, was ambushed by a concealed enemy force, the attackers springing from the shadows, their weapons blazing. The men, caught by surprise, fought back with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The battle raged at close quarters, a brutal and chaotic melee, with men fighting and dying amidst the trees and undergrowth. The whispers now roared with the fury of combat, the clash of steel, the thunder of explosions, the cries of rage. Engineers, working under constant fire, struggled to clear paths through the dense vegetation, attempting to create routes for the tanks. But the enemy, determined to thwart their efforts, rained down artillery fire upon the engineers, destroying their equipment and inflicting heavy casualties. The whispers now groaned with the frustration of failure, of the insurmountable obstacles, of the seemingly endless struggle. As the fighting intensified, reinforcements arrived, bolstering the enemy's ranks and prolonging the battle. The men, exhausted and demoralized, fought on, driven by a sense of duty and a determination to survive. But the odds were stacked against them. The whispers now moaned with the resignation of defeat, of the inevitability of death, of the darkness that lay ahead. After weeks of relentless fighting, the advance stalled. The town remained tantalizingly out of reach, a symbol of the unattainable amidst the surrounding chaos. The men, battered and depleted, dug in where they could, seeking meagre shelter from the relentless rain and the constant threat of enemy fire. The whispers now whispered of madness, of the psychological toll of the battle, of the descent into despair. A new offensive was launched, a desperate attempt to break the stalemate. But the outcome remained the same: slow, agonizing progress, measured in yards and paid for in blood. One unit, tasked with capturing a strategic hill, found itself facing a formidable array of defences. The enemy dug in deep, their positions heavily fortified. The hill, known only by a numerical designation, became a symbol of the entire conflict, a focal point for the battle's most intense and brutal fighting. The whispers now echoed with the names of the lost, a mournful litany of those who had fallen on the slopes of the hill. The attack began with a frontal assault, the men charging up the hill, their weapons blazing. But they were met with a wall of fire, the enemy's machine guns and artillery mowing them down in droves. The hill became a killing field, the ground saturated with blood, the air thick with the stench of death. The whispers now howled with the pain of loss, the agony of defeat, the futility of war. The Rangers, elite soldiers renowned for their skill and courage, were called in to attempt the seemingly impossible, seize the fortified hilltop. They moved under cover of darkness, scaling the steep slopes, their movements shrouded by the dense vegetation. Their objective, Hill 400, a strategic point in the enemy's line. The summit, 400 metres above sea level, gave the Germans a commanding view of the surrounding terrain. The assault was a whirlwind of controlled violence. They moved swiftly, silently, clearing the outer defences with ruthless efficiency. Bunkers were stormed, pillboxes silenced, and enemy soldiers eliminated with practiced precision. The Rangers fought with a ferocity born of training and discipline, their every movement calculated, their every action decisive. The whispers were drowned out by the cacophony of battle, the roar of explosions, the crackle of gunfire, the screams of the dying. They reached the summit, their ranks thinned, their bodies battered, but their spirits unbroken. The hill was theirs. They had achieved the impossible, but their victory was short-lived. The enemy, determined to regain control of the high ground, launched a series of relentless counterattacks, their forces swarming up the slopes, their weapons blazing. The whispers now sang of defiance, a testament to the Rangers' unwavering resolve. The battle raged throughout the day, a brutal and chaotic melee fought amidst the ruins of the fortifications. The Rangers, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with grim determination, repelling wave after wave of attackers. They used every weapon at their disposal, rifles, machine guns, grenades, even their bare hands to defend their hard-won prize. The whispers now thrummed with the energy of desperate combat, the clash of steel, the thunder of explosions, the cries of pain. Reinforcements arrived, bolstering the enemy's ranks, and the pressure on the Rangers intensified. The fighting became even more intense, the battle line shifting back and forth, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Rangers, exhausted and demoralised, fought on, driven by a sense of duty and a determination to survive. The whispers now lamented the diminishing numbers, a stark reminder of the sacrifices they were making. After days of relentless fighting, the Rangers' numbers dwindled. Many had fallen, their bodies lying scattered across the slopes of the hill. Those who remained were weary, wounded and outnumbered, but they refused to surrender. The whispers now echoed with the echoes of their courage, a testament to their indomitable spirit. On the last day of the battle, the enemy launched a final, all-out assault, their forces swarming up the hill, their weapons blazing. The Rangers, their ammunition exhausted, their strength depleted, fought to the last man. The hill was retaken, the enemy's flag raised once more above the summit. The whispers now wept with the sadness of defeat, the futility of sacrifice, the tragedy of war. The battle for the forest ended in stalemate. The enemy had held their ground, denying the attackers access to the vital water reservoirs. The casualties were staggering, tens of thousands of men lost, their lives sacrificed in a brutal and senseless conflict. The whispers now spoke of the futility of it all, the senseless slaughter, the enduring pain. As the fighting subsided, silence descended upon the forest, a silence broken only by the wind rustling through the trees and the mournful cries of the birds. The forest remained, a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within its depths. The whispers remained too, carried on the wind, echoing through the trees, a haunting reminder of the price of war. They spoke of loss, of sacrifice,